The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. I must tell you, I still have not personally gotten over the brutal political assassination of my friend Charlie Kirk. I didn't really know Charlie until that fateful morning, September of 2019, when 29 FBI agents stormed my home at 6 o'clock in the morning to arrest me for the non-existent crime of lying about Russian collusion that never actually happened. And prior to my being the target of a Soviet-style show trial in which the judge in my case, Judge Amy Berman Jackson, essentially denied me any plausible legal defense and withhold multiple pieces of exculpatory evidence from my defense attorneys. It really was a disgrace. But Charlie Kirk reached out to me and said that he knew there was no Russian collusion. He knew that I was being pressured relentlessly to testify falsely against my friend of then about 40 years, Donald Trump, and that he would become both a public and a private advocate for clemency in my case. I now realize, looking back at it, that he tweeted, then it was called Twitter, at least 50 times advocating for clemency, but more precisely pointing out the many discrepancies, unfairnesses, and corruption of the prosecution of my case. And for that, I will always be greatly indebted. As someone who wrote a New York Times best-selling book on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, should you order it, get it in paperback. It has 3 additional chapters. As someone who has just finished writing and will soon publish a book on the attempted assassination of President Ronald Reagan, as someone who has examined the assassination of Senator Robert F. Kennedy and realizes that Sirhan Sirhan cannot possibly be the assassin because, among other things, Thomas Noguchi, the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner, one of the most respected pathologists in the country, says in his autopsy report that Kennedy was shot with 3 point-blank rounds at the left rear of his skull, and Sirhan Sirhan was always in front of Kennedy. As one who recognizes the many discrepancies regarding the government's claim that James Earl Ray killed Dr. Martin Luther King on April 4th, 1968, despite the fact that Ray himself has recanted, and the fact that the King family filed a subsequent civil suit against the FBI, the Secret Service, the Memphis Police, and certain members of organized crime, and they won that lawsuit. That means a federal civil court has ruled that there was government complicity in Dr. King's murder. I am deeply disturbed by the FBI's attempts to rush to judgment in the question of Charlie Kirk. Now, just to try to summarize their conclusions, the FBI has identified and taken into custody a 22-year-old, Tyler Robinson. They claim he is the sole suspect in the killing of Charlie Kirk. Robinson, a Utah resident, was arrested on September 15th, shortly after the shootings. Authorities now claim that he acted alone, although the FBI continues to investigate the possibility of accomplices or broader involvement. No additional charges against others have been filed. They claim that there is DNA evidence as well as on a towel, also on the rifle, and 4 spent shell casings that were recovered in a wooded area near the campus. This reminds me very much of the Kennedy assassination, where they claimed that Lee Harvey Oswald's fingerprints were on the alleged murder weapon, only to learn that FBI agents had visited the morgue where the murdered Lee Harvey Oswald was to place his fingerprints, his cold fingerprints, on the barrel and stock of the gun that they would later claim was used in Kennedy's assassination. They also claim that there are digital communications, specifically on Discord, a gaming app that incriminate Tyler Robinson. we've seen various different stories. The Wall Street Journal ran with a story that said that there were etchings or scratchings on the shell casings that tied Robinson and his roommate to the trans phenomena. That story turned out to be completely false, like most stories in the Wall Street Journal. But they also seem to go out of their way to try to claim him to the Antifa movement. It all seems a little too pat to me. Then there's the question of whether he shot, disassembled his rifle, then fled, then reassembled the rifle and left it in a place that was easy to find. That makes no sense to me. Then there's the question of whether he changed out of the clothes he was wearing during the shooting only to change back into them so he could be arrested in them. Again, very little of this makes much sense, but the greatest questions surround the actual shooting itself, and that's why I decided to consult an expert. Paul K. Maurer, doctor, is a leading neurologist in this country. He was, most interestingly, the chief of neurology at the 86th Evacuation Hospital for the 101st Airborne Division in Saudi Arabia during the Gulf War. He has his neurology residency was performed at the University of Rochester Medical Center. He is a undergraduate at the University of Rochester. Also got his medical degree from the University of Rochester. He was the attending neurosurgeon for the U.S. Army at the Letterman Medical Center in San Francisco, California. He's the assistant professor of neurology at the University of Rochester from 1992 to 1998. Professor of neurology at the University of Rochester, 98 to the present time. He was also served as the attending neurosurgeon for the UHS Wilson Medical Center and has been a board-certified member of the American Board of Neurosurgery since 1988. I originally had him on my show to talk about the Kennedy assassination. His observations are absolutely fascinating, and it's really time for me to shut up and let him speak. So, Dr. Maurer, welcome to the Roger Stone Show. And here's where I'd like to start. The government claims that the rifle that they have recovered a 35-06 shell, I believe it is, and based on much of the reading I've done from both medical experts as well as marksmen, such a bullet shot, if it really came from the front, I believe, or at least based on what I've read, should have left some exit wound and some blood splatter. So that's a good starting place, but I'm going to let Dr. Maurer take it from there.
It's an honor to be here, Mr. Stone, and I thank you very much for having me. With regard specifically to that question, and we're going to plow through this kind of, if I might, go back to the cause of the things we know for sure, because I've been a neurosurgeon for well over 14,000 brain and spinal cord surgeries, which makes you always feel the need in any scientific discipline to deal with what you know for sure and then work out from there, like using a GPS. You have to know where you are to know where you're going. With regards to the 30-06, I thought your comments were interesting about the historical aspects of these events. Body, governmentally that has, they're understandable. This is what we think happened. I get it. Just like the COVID issue, not to bring up another government event, but I'm just being honest. If someone said, well, why do you guys always run through these quote-unquote conspiracy theories? Because when you've been led astray multiple times, with certainty we have been, it is natural that an inquiring mind, if you will, would want to be sure we're certain the road we're going down. And so I think the road we're on today is justifiable and makes sense. Let's talk for a second about 30-06. 30 is the caliber. It's a third of an inch, 0.3 inches. 06 comes from the year it was popularized by the military. It was used until the Korean War as a military cartridge. It's mostly used as a hunting round now. I lecture to a lot of military. I do bullet wound lectures for the government and governments overseas. And that doesn't mean anything other than I spend a lot of time with military snipers. from a lot of countries. I don't know anybody that uses a 30-06 as a tactical weapon. Why is that important? Because the depth of penetration of a bullet, when a bullet strikes, let's just, for the sake of discussion, we'll just make we'll take this out of the Charlie Kirk scenario and just use a generic neck. We have a generic person who gets shot in the neck with a rifle bullet, a 30-06. Well, the 30-06 rifle is very similar to what's called .308, which is a very, very common military and civilian round. It is true there's a longer casing. In other words, the amount of propellant for the 30-06 is about 12 millimeters deeper and it's stacked. So they do have a lot of power. And it is now used partly for that reason for mid to large game. But how deep does a bullet go? This is something not to take a lot of time at all on this, but because when you watch the videos, and I've watched, it's got to be 100 of these things by now since the sad event of Charlie Kirk. There is a belief that this is it's like the Marvel comic book ballistics interpretation. The bigger the bullet, the deeper it goes, the more powerful it is. That's actually not quite true. It's generically true. But bullet performance in tissue, when that bullet hits your neck, how deep is that bullet going to go? Part of it's the caliber, but a significant part of it is bullet design. If you're a military sniper shooting bipeds, this is almost never brought up in these reviews. Hunters like deep penetration, and the 30-06 gives deep penetration. In other words, yeah, you'd expect that bullet to go in the front and out the back, or equivalently, in the back, out the front. That would be true if it was a .308. That would be true if it's a 30-06. A neck is only 8-9 inches deep. He has a fairly beefy neck, but it's mostly muscle, other than the cervical spine, which is about 30 millimeters. The rest, 30 millimeters wide. The rest of it's all muscle and blood vessels, trachea, windpipe, esophagus. None of that's a big impediment to a bullet going through your neck. So, yes, the caliber is powerful. That's why it's used as a hunting round. But the hunting round I'm harping on because hunters shoot quadrupeds. They shoot animals with 4 legs. 80 to 90% of hunting takedowns are through the side of the animal. In other words, you hit the right chest, and you want that bullet going all the way across the heart, all the way across the other lung, and out the other side. Military doesn't want that. Bipeds, less than 12% of shots. The Israeli Defense Forces in the Bekaa Valley incursion published a nice article in the surgical literature. Less than 12% of shots were through the side because it's a smaller surface area. Just on statistical grounds, it's less likely you're going to shoot that, just like with a deer. The number of deer that get shot front on is relatively lesser because it's a smaller target. So hunters want deep penetration. The military wants maybe 16, maybe 18 inches because at that point, you're out the other side of the body most of the time. You want that bullet to hit the tissue, and you're going to get a hole in the neck. In this round, let's just for the sake of discussion say it was a 30-06. When that bullet hits the front of that sternocleidomastoid muscle, that big, beefy muscle that comes down your neck, you look in the mirror, you see that groove. The carotid artery is about 2.5, 3 inches deep to that. We go through that every week when you do anterior cervical fusions. That is our standard approach. You cut that muscle edge, swing it aside, put your finger in, you feel the carotid within 2.5 inches or so, depends on the size of the neck. And then another inch, and you're right on the front of the spine. When that bullet hits, you're going to get a hole like a freight train going all the way through the neck, the size of the bullet. In this case, about 0.3 inches. How deep that bullet goes is heavily dependent on bullet design. Some bullets, like some of the assault rifle bullets, many of them are made to enter tissue in within 3 or 4 inches, still within the middle of a neck, to start to wobble. When they wobble, they dump the energy. All that energy in that flying projectile starts to swell the tissue and rip it apart. Then you get these big exit wounds. But if you have a hunting round that's designed to go 26, 28 inches, and a lot of the 30-06 hunting bullets, there's over 100 30-06 bullets available. Most of them are designed for very deep penetration because that's what people are using them for, hunting quadruped animals.
All right, we're going to have, let me stop you there. We're going to have to take a quick commercial break, and then we'll be back with more of Dr. Paul Maurer in a breakdown on the brutal murder of Charlie Kirk. One of the questions I want to ask is whether the doctor believes, based on what he is seeing, that indeed Kirk was shot from the front, or I'd like to get his view on some of these alternative theories that he could have been shot from behind, from the side, or whether, in fact, his microphone could have been used as a weapon. All of that when we get back on The Roger Stone Show. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This shrimp and coconut sauce is divine. What's your secret?
Goya coconut milk.
How does it taste so good?
It's all in that real coconut flavor and that rich, creamy texture.
What about thickeners and added sugars?
None. Just smooth, coconutty goodness.
What can I make with it?
From curries to sweet treats like coconut flan, the possibilities are endless.
Goya coconut milk. Take your cooking to the next level. No question about it. Find it in the Goya section of your local grocery store. If it's Goya, it has to be good.
Anyone can follow. It takes something special to be an original. Which is why the 2025 Lincoln Navigator SUV arrives with new ways of surrounding you in luxury, including the ultra-wide 48-inch panoramic display and the multi-sensory Lincoln Rejuvenate experience. A true original never stops evolving. So meet the 2025 Navigator, the original that's all new and better than ever. Learn more at Lincoln.com. Lincoln and Navigator are trademarks of Ford or its affiliates.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back. We're talking to Dr. Paul K. Maurer, one of the most respected neurosurgeons in the country, a man with vast experience when it comes to gunshot wounds. We were talking about the potential damage done by a .36 shell, allegedly shot from the front. Now, again, historically, they told us that Lee Harvey Oswald got off only 3 shots, all 3 of them hitting John F. Kennedy from the rear. We now know, based on numerous sources, but most specifically, the doctors who attended John F. Kennedy at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, that those doctors saw wounds in Kennedy consistent with his being shot from the front and the back. And those wounds, at least at Parkland, included a large rear exit wound the size of a grapefruit, as one doctor said it. Those doctors, according to a new documentary by Paramount, were threatened by FBI agents and Secret Service agents to not discuss what they had seen, fearing that their medical licenses would be revoked if they did so. It was only many years after the fact that those doctors came forward, and to a man, they all insisted that they had seen wounds in Kennedy from the front and the back, which really almost totally debunked the incorrect findings of the Warren Commission. Also find it interesting that there has been no autopsy performed or released on Charlie Kirk, although we know that Utah state law does require the local medical examiner, in this case the medical examiner of Utah County, to conduct an autopsy based on the standard homicide protocol. That I find interesting. We also obviously wonder about all of these questions that have been raised regarding the microphone that Charlie Kirk was wearing. Dr. Maurer and I both looked at various videos that appear to be some kind of, explosion, some other event involving the microphone. Strange video of a man jumping over the table, seeming to grab something from Kirk, hand it off to another man. Strange signaling by some of Charlie Kirk's own security staff, touching the brims of their hats, making strange motions. And then, I guess, lastly, the thing I find most curious, the security camera behind Charlie Kirk that would have captured so many of these events, immediately taken down and removed by a member of the security staff, and no effort to secure the murder scene so that people could just come and go, therefore despoiling and contaminating any evidence there. And based on other reports, no extensive interviews of the many, many eyewitnesses who saw the whole thing. So that's a lot to wrap up and hand over to Dr. Maurer, but we now return to him for his analysis.
If we may, let's polish off this anterior front shot, back shot, which I think we can wrap up fairly efficiently, and then get to this very interesting microphone theory. The minute you hear the signature of the sound, the minute you hear the sound of the gunshot, keeping in mind sound goes about 1,100 feet per second, that bullet left the muzzle, if that was what it was, at 2,900 feet per second. So the sound hits before you hear the sound. The bullet hits before you hear the sound on the stage. That initial impact, that little flash of blood, I know this sounds sacrilegious. Is it an exit wound? May well be. Is it an entry wound? Yes, it can be.
Doctor, I'm going to hold you up there. We're going to go to the break, then we're going to come back and let you continue.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back on the Roger Stone Show here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Our guest, one of the most preeminent neurosurgeons in the country, Dr. Paul K. Maurer, who has served his country and also is recognized as probably one of the country's, if not the world's, foremost expert on gunshot wounds specifically, trying to help us parse through of the enormous amount of information on the internet regarding the tragic murder of my good friend Charlie Kirk. Yesterday, Candace Owens, someone I like very much, who was a close friend of Charlie Kirk's, came forward to say that her sources told her that the man accused of the crime, Tyler Robinson, has not pled guilty, is not suicidal, has never actually been on the campus of the University of Utah, and that the entire claim that his parents turned him in is false. Not sure what to make of all of that yet, other than the fact that Candace has a tendency to turn out to be right. Most of her prognostications, I'm an admirer of her reporting, and she was indeed a very close friend of Charlie Kirk's. We're still trying to get at whether or not the government's at least temporary claim, because the investigation is still open, that Charlie Kirk was shot from the front, from an elevated height by Tyler Robinson from a tall building. We're waiting for a lot more information as many Americans doubt that narrative. They also seem to be leading us to a conclusion that the motive here was the leftist radicalization of Tyler Robinson, that he had come to hate Donald Trump. There was an entirely false narrative generated largely by the Wall Street Journal that tried to pigeonhole him as a transgendered activist, or claimed that there were pro-transgendered slogans etched on the casings of some of the shells used allegedly in this killing. The FBI does not now claim that. They claim that the shell casings had anti-fascist slogans on them, specifically one saying, "Hey, fascists, catch," the other one citing lyrics from Bella Ciao, which was a famous Italian anti-fascist ballad. At this point, it's very hard to know what to believe. I'm going to return the floor to Dr. Maurer, who is walking us through the possibilities. We're right now going to try to assess this claim that he was shot from the front, along with other additional claims that may not be the case. Dr. Maurer.
Thank you, sir. So let's just finish the walkthrough with the government, feeling that he was shot from the front. Again, sacrilege or not, I'll die on this hill. That wound can be entry or exit. If it's an exit wound, it's not a very dramatic exit wound for a 30-06. However, that the neck is only 8 or 9 inches of soft tissue. So many bullets, particularly that bullet, don't start to wobble by design until they're deeper than that. So that type of bullet can have a pretty innocuous entry and a not very impressive exit at that depth of penetration. So the wound that you see immediately after the sound, or actually a little before the sound, actually, it could be either. I think the people that say that had to be an exit wound, frankly, a lot of surgery exposure to this stuff, I would disagree. So, because the bullet may not have started to wobble. So that wound doesn't give us a definitive answer. The minute the bullet hits that neck, like a baseball bat hitting a ball, all that kinetic energy starts to go in the neck. You see it very dramatically. The whole, if you go frame by frame, the whole neck, all of it, up to the jaw on both sides, swells 15-20% of his neck size. Compare his pre-wound and the minute of impact. That's a ton of kinetic energy, consistent with a very impressive round that's got a lot of energy in it, like rifle bullets do. Incidentally, little segue important. Some people have made much of the head wobble, the way the head went. We don't have time to go into that in detail. The Kennedy assassination, very different. That was a shot in the head. Shots in the lower neck or upper neck, the head pivots at the top of the post, like a meatball on a stick. And Alvarez, you know that story more than I, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and everybody else has looked at this. The head wobble does not give you definitive answers to front or back here. Somewhat agnostic when you really go through the whole video. What about the flexion of the shoulders and the arms? Anything that kisses the spinal cord will make that happen, front or back. When that neck swells, all that energy is going into the spinal canal. That bullet probably never did hit the cervical spine, but the energy sure did, which, whether the bullet came from in front or the back, gives you that immediate flexion, decorticate posturing, the shoulders go up. That is, if the spinal cord is in the middle of your neck, and any kinetic energy blast wave to the spinal cord gives you that response. The spinal cord has no idea which way that bus came through, from the front or the back. Also, agnostic to help us. Now, you would expect any significant rifle round, not just a 30-06, in that area, all soft tissue, to go flying right out the back. I wouldn't want to be standing behind him. 90%, I would expect that. The only thing, I have to be fair, try to put each piece of the tile down on the floor here. If you got to remember that bullet's fired on a 20-degree down angle, roughly, as best I can estimate. If you look at him from the side, draw a flat horizontal line, aim down, inclination 20 degrees, that bullet from the front would have gone into the upper chest cavity, into the upper thoracic vertebrae. That bullet's traveling down slightly in trajectory. Can a upper thoracic vertebrae and rib junction stop a bullet of that type? They can. I'd say 90% no. Is it possible that bullet shattered into the thoracic spine and drove itself down the rib cage? It's possible. So I can't, that's not definitive. I'm a little surprised, but can't throw that whole concept into the river because of that. All right, so what about a shot from behind? Similar. The only things I would say, the important points for me would be, we have about 280 degrees of visualization of the neck because there's 4 camera angles that have been widely published, from the left, from the right, 2 from different depths in front. I don't see any entry dynamics on the back of his head or his neck. You can get a lot through a hairline. We get a lot of people, I've taken of lots of people shot with, you don't see much in the hair. You always see a little bit of brain, interestingly, because the brain swells, squirts out the back. But you can hide a lot under hair. But that would be a very steep down angle to get all the way to the inferior cervical junction into the sternocleidomastoid carotid, that low, just above the clavicle. So my question for the shot from behind, okay, he gets shot from behind, then that makes that little wound in the front of his neck, that's an exit wound. Well, 30-06, not that it had to be a 30-06, but just using that as an example, it leaves the muzzle. If you pull that trigger, that bus is going 2,900 feet per second, 2,800. It loses it to about 2,500 at 200 yards, if we say that's the distance that we shot at. Maybe going through 8 to 9 inches of soft tissue pretty accurately. You drop another 300 to 400 feet a second. That means when that bullet left the front of his neck, it's still going 2,000 feet a second. And if you look at the video, that area in front of him for 3 decks up is shoulder to shoulder, neck to butt people. There's almost no space in there. So if a bullet exited the front of his neck, and it would have exited it at about 2,000 feet a second, even an assault rifle bullet would have exited there. They slow down quicker because they're lighter. They don't have momentum, but you still would have been going 1,500 feet a second. That's more than a .357 Magnum handgun coming at you. So nobody got hit. Nobody got hurt. Nobody saw anything hit the grass or anything else. I don't know how it would have got through there without hitting someone. So my question about the front to back story is there's nothing but people in front of him. And going through a neck with an exit wound, that thing's still going. That has no friends when it enters that crowd. So I'm not saying it could be. I'm not saying it couldn't have been from behind. I'm saying I'm suspicious that's not the answer.
Doctor, let me ask you, what do you make of these videos that we've both seen that appear that there's almost like an explosion under his shirt? It seems like a rise in the shirt that many people are attributing to somehow having to do with the level or mic being a death instrument here.
Yes. Now that's exactly where I was going next. I wanted to finish the government version, then the poster from the behind version. But let's get to this very interesting microphone story. Well, when you get hit, if you just take somebody out and shoot them in the neck, and they've got a T-shirt on, that blast wave, when that bullet hits the neck, all that energy starts dumping into the tissue, and on impact, some of it will make the shirt flap. You see it all the time on sniper visuals, many of which are videotaped, and you'll see the whole uniform on the other person puff at the top because the energy blows down through between the shirt layers. So initially, you watch his neck swell, you watch all the tissue under his jaw. It almost looks animated. It's so extensive, but it's actually very typical when you look at slow motion videos of shootings with rifles. So some of that puff may well be just this blast overpressure from impact. However, when the microphone theory came out, I find that very interesting. It sounds a little Star Wars like, and people, oh boy, these guys are really going down the rabbit hole. But we talked about the front to back shot. We talked about the back to front shot. Where the hell did that bullet go? And so this is interesting to me. Was this a blast? Just, okay, that if you look at the bottom of that device, which I'm sure a lot of your audience has, you can fill that with 2 grams of explosives, just like a pager, and they're devastating when they're literally below your face and on your neck. The Israelis certainly proved that with the Hezbollah folks. But there's nothing about this that impresses me as pure explosion. It does look like a blast. I'm going to give you a new theory I haven't quite heard yet, and you can do what you will with it, my friends. If that was a blast, I also do ballistic lectures, blast overpressure lectures to the military. So I spend a lot of time on blast overpressure, meaning explosive devices. When you get a blast, you get a symmetric explosion. If that microphone was filled with 2 grams of explosive, when it detonates, it's like a starburst. It doesn't just focus towards him. It goes everywhere symmetrically, just like a firecracker. The energy is not directed any one direction. His T-shirt's not ripped apart or burned. It's not. It eventually gets torn up, but it didn't. So how would you rip a carotid on the other side of the neck, but you didn't rip the T-shirt with the explosion?
I've got to stop you there once again. We're going to go to a commercial break, and we'll be back with Dr. Paul K. Maurer, who is outlining for us in great detail what happened, in his view, in the brutal assassination of my friend Charlie Kirk. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back on the Roger Stone Show. We're going to return to Dr. Paul K. Maurer, one of the country's most respected neurosurgeons, an expert on gunshot wounds. We only have, unfortunately, about 2.5 minutes left. Whenever I interview Dr. Maurer, it's never long enough. This is just fascinating. Doctor, I'm going to let you wrap this up.
Thank you, sir. I'm gonna suggest for consideration, just for consideration, a little variant here. Was that an explosive device? There's no thermal burn on Mr. Kirk's inferior jaw. Explosion is a symmetric event. Tears the T-shirt. It's a lot of thermal event. Small pieces of plastic, everything. This is a projectile injury. You can see that carotid artery pulsing out a specific hole. It's not a blast hole. This is a projectile hole. So as I went through all the microphone data, I had the, privilege, of when I was giving a lecture overseas, of firing some very small devices that fired bullets, like 22 long rifle bullets out of a pen, a little tiny cigarette lighter that very much fired a 22 rifle bullet. And yes, do you have to get pretty close? You do. But if you're the person putting it on somebody's shirt and you get it fixed the way you want, because after all, you work for them, I'm just saying for consideration. I'm not saying we know this. It's just food for thought. Are we sure that that wasn't a projectile delivered from that device? A .380 automatic bullet's pretty small, and it would give you, if it hits your carotid, you would be in trouble. Not to suggest they could aim for the carotid with that, but the microphone origin of this projectile, they're always very small projectiles, 22 long rifle, .380 ACP, also known as 9mm short. But at that distance, in a neck that's full of important stuff, if you hit the carotid, boy, you really got payday that day if you're the person doing it. But there's a lot of a bullet wound in the neck's very high fatality, even if it's not the carotid. There's a lot of stuff up there you need. And so rather than you see the explosion, quote unquote, may be the detonation of the cartridge under the T-shirt, which wouldn't give a thermal burn, which doesn't have extra projectiles flying up into the bottom of the neck from the plastic. It just sends the projectile straight into the tissue. So it made me ponder, how would you get a pure projectile bullet-like injury out of that microphone? And in fact, there are devices that even for decades have been designed and used of similar small nature. When the minute the cartridge goes off, that thing twists, so the accuracy is not great, but you're only a few inches away. It doesn't need to be great. And it does answer some of the problems. Why did the right side of the T-shirt puff more than the left? There's almost a finger-like projection of the T-shirt expanding right to left, which also goes along with this.
All right.
And where'd that bullet go? Well, that would go up into no place land. There weren't a lot of people off to the left side in an up angle.
Excellent analysis. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, but I think you have answered the central question, which is this possible? Yes, it is entirely possible. As we learn more about this, we're going to get Dr. Maurer back on the Roger Stone Show, because this has been the best breakdown I've heard so far. I want to thank the doctor for joining us today, and also thank our audience out there. Coming up next, former Capitol Hill Police Chief Stephen Sund to react to the shocking news that there were, in fact, 275 plainclothes FBI agents in the crowd on January 6th. What were they doing there? Perhaps Chief Sund can tell us. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder, what the heck is going on here?
This Sunday is the Tunnel to Towers Foundation Walk Run, and our team is in need of your support. Right now, every dollar counts. The WABC hosts must all rally their loyal audience to participate. Go to WABCRadio.com/walk and help your favorite hosts right here at WABC and support the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Go to WABCRadio.com/walk. Help WABC raise money for the amazing Tunnel to Towers Foundation Walk Run. Go to WABCRadio.com/walk.